Welcome to Let's Keep It Real, the show where the weird gets real and the real gets fun. I'm Queen Tasha, your host, here to spark conversation that breaks the mold, questions the norm, and celebrates the neurospicy perspective that makes life interesting. So grab a drink and let's keep it real because the Queen is ready to speak. Have you ever felt like you're living in a world like not built for your brain? Or you thought that everybody thought like you and you recently found out that that was wrong? You might be neurospicy. I recently wrote a blog about my neurospicy personality and breaking down, what I have become self aware about, how my brain works. I'm very interested in how, you know, things have been working. And the more that I learn about this neurodivergent topic, has allowed me to embrace, oh, okay, having a reason why I think this way, but also embracing it as part of like this wonderful collaboration of mush that makes up my beautiful human experience and the queen that I am. So, in today's episode of my first podcast, um, that will be of various different topics, but for today's first podcast, I would like to break down my neurospicy personality and kind of give some perspective to that blog that I wrote. And if you haven't read that blog, you can go over to my website at queentashasempire.com/blog, and you can find that blog about that. But I'm gonna do a video breakdown of all of that to spread some awareness, some community awareness for anybody that's out there that, is going to hear some stuff that I say and they're like, oh, okay. And you have that same thought that I had a couple of years ago, like, oh, I thought that everybody thought like that. Turns out I'm weird and there's a reason for why I'm weird. So, yeah, I'm going to break that down today and, yeah, give some perspective to, the person you're going to be listening to for the duration of however long I do this this podcast for. Um, so you have the perspective of like how my brain works. So let's get into it. First, I want to, just kind of briefly break down like the neurotypical, neurodivergent slash neurospicy perspective. Um, so neurotypical would be where the term social norm comes from. Like these people generally, don't struggle with um communication, organization, or blending in, or falling in line with the social norms. Like they're in my perspective, it's like they accepted the matrix programming as it should go through, and for me, my brain rejects it because I don't want to be a part of it. That's how I kind of look at it. Like that, it's like the programming that was set out for for us to accept and adopt and move on like little, rats and robots in the race. Um, Neurotypical people accepted that, and neurodivergent people have different um, personality, spicy personality that rejects that program, whether that rejection came from, a genetic perspective, something that our programming just rejected because our brain works differently. I believe our brain works differently, and where you break down the the neuro divergent, which is basically, somebody who does not qualify as normal based on certain mental um, or social disorders. They would not be normal. So that's basically what that is. But neurodivergent versus neurospicy is the embracing that being having these different classified or studied or whatever you want to say, labels in a sense, don't they're not a they are not a what's the word, deterrent for how we move in the world. We can still operate, we can still you know be a part of civilization in a sense, but we just have different coping mechanisms to mask or appear normal. So but we struggle with certain things more than a neurotypical person would. We just have different ways of how we figure out how to, like I said, cope with that. So, for me, my neurospicy personality breaks down into ADHD, autism, OCD, depression, anxiety, and dyslexia. Those are the main ones. And then I have some like bonus ones that I'll talk about later if this podcast don't get too long. I really wanted to make a video about this, and also, I really had wanted to get back into the space of podcasting. Here's me going off on a little tangent, and we'll talk about why my brain does this later, and how I'm very self aware of it, but it's just the way that it goes. But reason I want to do a podcast about this is because I had a podcast that was a selfless podcast. I am recording this so you can see my face, but I have a stoner podcast that I started back in 2019, I believe. And it was because I wasn't ready to do YouTube yet. Like I wasn't ready to have my face on camera yet and like go that whole thing. So I was like, podcast, perfect. I can just get on my phone and talk whatever for a little bit. The intention was to have people be there as well, like to either have a co-host or have regular guests. And that didn't come through as much as I was hoping. And I really have been trying to revive that podcast, but I just feel like, I'm ready to move on. Now, that's not to say that I'm not high now. And that I'm not going to talk about the same shenanigans type of stuff that I would have talked on that podcast. But I am going to keep it real as far as like being very vulnerable, which ties in some of my goals for my channel, which is to be more vulnerable um, about myself and, just the way that I think and my thoughts and, my perspective and the type of things that go along in my brain that I would like to share with other people to see if other people would be interested in it. The same way that Stoner Podcast took off. So this is, my 2025 goal is to have a podcast where I share my thoughts and shenanigans on a regular basis as a personal therapeutic vent for myself. Also to alleviate some of the talking to myself, even though I am talking to myself right now while I'm recording this for nobody but my dogs are asleep, so it's not recording it for them either, but I'm still talking to myself, but at least it's for a purpose. But sometimes I'm just talking to myself, no camera, no nothing. So speaking of dogs, they're asleep right now, but there's a lot of distractions, and dude is a protector, so he might bark and might have to pause this and come back. But I just wanted to break down why I'm doing a podcast. And yeah. And then I also wanted to come in here with Happy New Year for the people who celebrate that. For me, it is not the new year. Yeah, I could say happy 2025, this is the Gregorian calendar celebration of the dead of winter. Yes. I'm really curious what year it really is. Um, Based on that, I was just thinking about that today when I woke up. Um, what year it might really be if we were on a 13-month calendar and not a 12-month calendar, and if the new year was in spring, if we globally celebrated the new year in spring, um, what that would be like. That would be interesting. That would be an interesting timeline to be down. I've also been thinking about a lot of timeline stuff. Um, but let me get back to the topic. We get back to the topic again. So yeah, I want to break down, a couple of my things. This is gonna be definitely very personal information, but a lot of it's in the blog. I don't know how many people um are reading my blog outside of family. So if you're not, please go ahead and subscribe, and I can send it directly to you when I send it out. Um, you can do that on my website, or you can go to my website and read it. Whatever's your fancy. But yeah, I kind of just want to like explain some stuff in the blog. So I do have the blog up, and you might see me like skimming some of it just so I can remember. But let's start off with ADHD. I know it's a condition that a lot of people are being like, I'm ADHD, I'm ADD, and um, I am undiagnosed, but I am pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. Um, and with all of these things, I believe that there's a spectrum, just like everything. The rainbow exists in our life and appears when two things, when rain and sunshine happen. You have a rainbow that appears, and a spectrum is always there. Whether you're on the spectrum of sexuality, spectrum of a lot of other things that don't come to mind. Somebody's having a little party back here. They put up in their car. Loud music. We'll see if that comes through. um, but yeah, so there's multiple spectrums of life just in general and the perspective of life. So let's always keep that in mind. For some people, they live in the gray or in within the spectrum. They're not one thing or the other. Some people are really hardcore one thing or the other. And some people are real close to the line but not on the line. And they're like at the beginning of the gradual spectrum that makes a rainbow arch or the different colors of a rainbow. Um, but yeah, so please don't hit the mic. I hope I'm not too close or too far from the mic. Testing out this mic audio thing. Somebody's really jamming there. I thought that they would just like pull up and they would pull out. But they got at least it's good music. At least it's not trash. It's like some old school stuff. I can't help it. I'm in an RV and I'm parked in a neighborhood. So there's that. But yeah, so for me, and I'm not gonna like break down like what ADHD or any of these are really. Like, I'm just gonna give you like how I've dealt with it, how I've coped with it, how I've been aware, how I became aware of it, like that type of thing. So my biggest struggle with ADHD, among other things, but like my biggest one is object permanence. So if you don't know that what that is, it's basically like when you know something to exist, but when it goes away, you cease to believe that it exists. That's kind of like the just like very very like brief breakdown of what that means. But for me, how it shows up and how I found, and I recently found out that this is how it shows up, but object permanence, does also relate to people, not just like an object and like believing. It's kind of like if you think about like how babies' perspective is, like when you play peekaboo, like when you go down, they really do believe you disappeared. Like, and then when you pop up, they're like, oh, there he is again. Like in their brain, it hasn't cognitively come together that like, oh, he didn't really disappear. He's still right there. He's just playing a game. Eventually, they you do it if you over abuse it with the toddlers. They figure it out early, but just cognitively, that's just not how their brain works at that point in time. So as I've gotten older, for me, and I think this is something that kind of got passed down from my mom, and maybe a behavior or something, that's a habit that's tied to this object permanence that kind of came together for me, but is like keeping in touch with people. Like it's so hard for me to remember all the people that I want to connect with. And because a lot of times it's one-sided, like, you know, they want me to reach out to them, or that's the only way I'll be able to talk to them is if I reach out to them, So for me, keeping up with people that are not in my immediate, um, in real life, like if I'm not in your town, or I'm in the town that you're in, or I see you regularly online kind of thing. Because that's now becoming something that my brain is like, oh, okay, I do see them. I do connect with them because I see them all the time online. So my brain is like, okay, but not talking to them and actually saying something like is still how I just don't connect those things. But for me, like, I remember growing up where we didn't really stay in touch with family outside of holidays. And I didn't know that that was a weird thing until, I started going to my white friend's house and stuff. Or even some of my other, different ethnic background friends, where they really kept in touch with like their immediate family who did not live in their town, like didn't live around them, which was, close enough. And, on a regular basis, this is back when, only we had phone and paper mail communication. And they would paper mail, write letters, call on the phone regularly. And then I remember when the little phone with the camera came out, then a lot of people started FaceTiming, back then. This is like late late 90s, late 1900s. And I, like that didn't, it didn't really click for me that that was an issue. I remember that. And this is what's bringing it back to like some of the things like that, at first I just thought it was like a family thing, like a family behavior thing. Like we just, you only call on the holidays, and that was just our family. And even then, it was like one sided. You know what I'm saying? Like we would call them, they're like, "Hi, Auntie, hi, Granny, hi, Nana," like, but they didn't keep in contact with us like on a regular basis to be like, hey, this is who we are, and we're trying to get to know you, and you get to know us, and outside because you're far away, like let's keep in touch. Like it's never been like that in my family. So I just always assumed that it was just like a family issue until I started learning about this object permanence thing that's related to ADHD, and how that, as I've been nomadic in my adult life and not just RV life, like as I've moved away, like I moved away from Maryland to be in North Carolina. It wasn't that far, but I didn't know anybody when I went there, and then, it brought family down and stuff like that. But even then, I was keeping in touch with immediate family, even though there was people that eventually came there that I never kept in contact with when I was like there. Until I left, I'd even talk to them. So, same thing with Atlanta. I have a little bit of family in Atlanta. When I first moved to Atlanta, I was, staying with them, staying with a few people. But there's a lot more of us, and we just don't communicate. And so, but for me, as I went further and further away from my immediate family, I realized the more that they were out of sight, they were out of mind. And so I just like, it wasn't that I didn't care about them or that I didn't want to keep in touch with them. It, the people that were around me is who I was staying in touch with. Like the friends that I was making, the people that was in my immediate space is who I was remembering to stay in touch with. People back home, as I started moving further and further away, from North Carolina to Atlanta, then eventually Texas and then Florida, like the keeping in touch with my sister, my brother, and that's always been a little sparse, but my mother, and other people, just like my immediate family. It felt like a struggle, like to remember to contact them and to remember to connect with them and to remember to that I want it. It was always in the back of my mind. Like back in the day, like when cards were a special thing, like I used to go to the Dollar Tree when they were 2 for $1 and like get a bunch of cards and have a card box. And every time it was like somebody's birthday or holiday, I always wanted to be on top of like sending my cards. That was something that my mom always forgot to do. And I always watched her struggle with that. And because she really had good intentions, she just always would get it all ready and then never send it out. And then if it was too late, and then it was just like, okay, well, I guess it doesn't go out. I did all that work for nothing. But I always wanted to be on top of that. Like I always was like super wanted to be on top of staying connected in that way, in that paper way. And then there was several attempts that I had with like family specifically, to bring a connection to try to help me, which I didn't realize this was like a coping mechanism, but like try to help me remember them by them participating in communicating back and forth, like intentionally. There was like several cycles throughout my 20s, and I think I lost hope in my 30s, but like like several cycles definitely in my 20s and probably late 20s into 30s, where I was trying to connect myself to my immediate family. And some of them suck. Like a lot of them suck as far as like reciprocating communication. But in my way of trying to cope and connect, I would be like, I would sit down and be like, okay, let's schedule a time that we like talk regularly. Like, let's put it on the calendar like adults. Sometimes I think like, that we all think like that, but we don't. So I'm like, let's put it on a calendar. This goes to my OCD. We'll talk about that later. Let's put it on a calendar and like, let's schedule it. And some people are like, I don't really think that way. And I'm like, this would really help me stay connected with you. They don't understand it. And when they don't want to do it, or they don't participate, or they're not enthusiastic to participate, or they don't really want to do it, or we do it and then it doesn't last. Like it's like, okay, 1, 2, like tennis game, 1, 2, and then the other person's like out. So I've struggled with that. Like, so that happened. It started with family, then eventually it moved to friends as I started to grow, and then move from friends that I made in Atlanta, and then I moved to Houston for a year, where I had nobody that I knew there when I moved there, and then kind of made a couple friends and was like, well, I'm not making any more friends. I'm not staying here. Let me go to Florida. And then get to Florida, and by the time I got to Florida, after having my spiritual awakening during that time, and just like connection was just like really weird for me at that point, because everything that I've always known and anybody that I would ever associate with, was from one perspective that died, that no longer existed. So it was just like, it was really hard to connect at that point. But, I always try to, connect with people, whether it's on a romantic level through dating apps and stuff like that, whether it's friends. I've always tried to start little groups or meetups or events where I can connect with humans. And I'm gonna get a little emotional, but it's a struggle, because if it's not reciprocated, I don't remember. So like the main thing is people. But as I've gotten older, and I'm sure this comes with age, uh, it has now progressed into like actual objects, like actual things, like where will swear I remember putting something somewhere, but because I didn't put it back in the place that it should go, I put it in an alternative place, and it ends up being lost in the house for a couple hours, couple days, couple months. It just depends on the item and how urgently I need it back. A lot of times I'm like, I know it didn't leave the house. So I'm like, it's in the RV somewhere. I'll be flipping through something and I'll find it. I'm not gonna freak out about it right now. I'm not gonna freak out, lose my shit. I do for a little bit though. Like I do go crazy, like trying to find. I'm like, I know it's in here. Like I know I didn't take it outside and lose it, and like I know it's in here, and I can't find it because I didn't put it back in the right place. Like I'm super organized, and again, we'll get to that. Like when I like to be super organized, or at least know like everything has its place. You know what I'm saying? Even if it's a little shuffle, like you got the little junk drawer, you have the little drawer. I know all the things in that drawer in the same category, and so I know where to go find stuff. Um, but if I don't put it back in that spot, and I don't know why I keep doing this to myself. Like I don't know why I don't like. It's a little bit of laziness, like where and unenthusiasm that comes with like that's what at least the thought that goes through my brain like when I'm like thinking about putting something away. If it seems like it's gonna be too complicated to put away, I won't put it in the spot that it needs to go. Like if it needs to go under the bed, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to get under the bed because my dogs are on the bed, and I have to lift up the bed. I'm like, I don't want to disturb them right now, so I'll go put it somewhere else, and then it's lost in the house because I'll forget about it or whatever. And then when I go look for it in the spot that it's supposed to be, I'm like, oh, it's not there. Fuck did I put it then? Because I remember having the thought of putting it away, and then I also have the thought of, oh, I didn't put like after I go look for it, then I have the thought, oh yeah, I didn't, I didn't execute that fully putting it away. That's been a struggle. That's been a struggle for the last couple of years, and it's been a struggle of denial too, because like I don't think that it's existing. I'm just like, what? How did I? Why would I do that? That kind of thing. I'm constantly just like, Tasha, why? Why are you not putting it back where it's supposed to go? Like, it doesn't make sense. You like things to be where it's supposed to be. Now, if somebody else put it in the wrong space, like, lose my shit. You know what I'm saying? With myself, I go crazy for a little bit, and then I'm just like, fuck it, it's in the house. I'll find it later. So yeah, that's been my main struggle with ADHD. Like, but also there's the hyperfocus. So for me, I can go and get like I'll be on my computer and just like go hard on a task. I'll have a thought or I'll have a task on my task board that I'll go hard on it, and I'll just like go for hours. I'll like hold my pee and know I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, I gotta get these couple little things last stint. And I'll hold and pee, resist eating, or not resist eating, but like forget about eating, or let meals go prolong longer than my stomach is like, what's going on? I thought we was gonna eat right now. I thought you was gonna stop and eat, because I'm hyper focused on a task. That also can lead to, especially this sometimes happens when I smoke, so the hyper focus also shows up with forced multitasking. So if you've ever been like in a focusing, like you're gonna get stuff done kind of cycle, you go to do one thing and you realize, oh, I gotta, before I can even clean the sink, I gotta do the dishes. So you're like, oh, okay, I gotta stop and do the dishes, and you start doing the dishes, and you look back. I'll look back and be like, oh, I didn't make the bed. Yeah. So like in the middle, like I might, just be finishing doing the dishes or something like that, but I was gonna clean the sink, and I didn't clean the sink, so I go back to the bed because I'm like, okay, I gotta get the bed done, and then I come back, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't clean the sink, or I was in the middle of something, it's weird that I'm super self aware that it's happening, but it's like I can't control not doing it. It's like it's my brain just is like, okay, this is what's gonna happen. And as much as I'm like, but I know what you're trying to do. It's like, I know, but this is what's gonna happen. And I'm just like, well, so I'll go back and I'll just get in this cycle of like doing tasks outside of the tasks that, and it's just like forced multitasking, because what I've learned recently is that like multitasking is not a thing. There's like, or it is a thing, obviously, but it is not a productive thing for, especially for people who are ADHD. Like it's better to, have some structure to um focus on one thing at a time and then get it done, but like not get so focused on it that you forget or refuse, in the sense of my brain, to go to the bathroom or eat or something like that. Um, so yeah, there's that's how it shows up for me. Um, the coping techniques that I use to manage ADHD have been like, if anybody now, you to do list queen. Okay, like I can't remember not having to do lists. Like I feel like I've always had to do lists. I have several journals. Like I really don't want to get rid of like journals. Like I'm a paper hoarder like my mom. Like I like to keep sentimental things that are related to paper, but my mom keeps weird stuff. Um, but yeah, so I have all these journals. Like I want to be like Anne Frank and all those people you find later, in my time capsule, that have like all my journals of to-do lists and stuff. So somebody can like, once I'm done, like take my brain out and then read this stuff and be like, that's what was going on in there. Like my to-do list have so many like different facets. Like I have to-do lists for certain things. I do a brain dump every once in a while where I just want to get everything out of my brain that's like that just popping up throughout the day. Like I try to remember it all. Usually I have to get stoned and then write it out, because that's usually when the creative juices are flowing, and all once the creative juices are flowing, then every other thing that else that I need to do will usually come up too, and that usually is helpful. Um, so um, so it's to do lists, setting reminders, putting things back where they go if I can remember. But a lot of these things are I'm realizing right now, like within the last 2 years since I've turned 40, I'm 41. So that these techniques that I've used to manage that used to feel rewarding and helpful, coping mechanisms, like are no longer working. I think it's also because that I'm becoming more self-aware of my neurospicy personality. The more that I become self-aware of like, oh, okay, that's the way my brain works. That's the way my brain works. Oh, that's related to this. Oh, okay, that's why my brain works this way. Like, the more that I do that, like all of the things that I've done up until this point to cope or mask with them are like, no, that's not gonna work anymore. Like it's like when you find out that Kraft cheese is not cheese. You can't eat it anymore. It's basically like that. Um, so yeah, it's that's how my brain right now is relating. So it's a very, very like tough struggle right now as far as like the self-awareness that I'm having along with things, as well as figuring out how to have new coping techniques that are no longer like working the way that they felt good about before. And so yeah, I'm working on that. I'm looking at my to-do list as we speak, and I'm looking at the expired calendar because I forgot to. I haven't gone to the Dollar Tree to get my calendar, and I didn't make a calendar this year, which I intended to, but didn't get to that. The other thing about to-do lists is that I overwhelm the to-do list because I have this this superhero complex, I guess, that I think that I can do more stuff in the amount of time that I have based on all the other things that I have to keep up with, like my dogs and the house and moving and not moving and working and all these things. So it's like the to-do list, they're either overwhelming at some point because I put a bunch of stuff that doesn't get done in the time or frame that I thought I could get it done. So it's like having that bypass of expectations. This is like really interesting right now as far as like this whole self-awareness of my neurospicy personality. But let's move on to the next thing. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is my autistic spectrum. So um it looks like everybody that was when they were a baby, um and they were born, the doctor came in and gave them a bunch of cocktails, things, and that has progressed over the years of um how many and how frequent and how close together they are since my time. So I know I wasn't like the first wave. I think it started in like the late 60s, 70s as far as the amount they were giving infant children. Uh but it increased when it got to my era, which is the Zennial era, the early 80s, and then, you know, doubled, tripled and quadrupled since then. Uh everybody that got that has a little bit of, you know, got a little bit of something that of a cocktail that was an experiment, and we're now seeing how the long-term effects happen. But um but not to say that's the reason for mine, but I'm just giving that perspective of just like, yeah. um but for me, the way that it shows up, um one that's always kind of been there that I didn't realize um was a thing that had a name, and that I was even doing it regularly until, like I said, I became self-aware of the pattern. So this is social mimicry, which I found out is a behavior known as echopraxia. um this means that I adopt certain social cues, accents, or phrases from the group that I'm in to feel like I belong. It's an unconscious process, but it helps to blend and navigate a situation that might otherwise feel overwhelming. Um, so for some, like I would say on the spectrum of autism, you know, like I'm probably, if this is the middle, and this is normal, and this is super autistic, I'm probably like right here. Like, I'm definitely not normal when it comes to that. You know, I didn't realize that I was doing this, you know, until after moving around a little bit. When I first moved to North Carolina and then came back for the summer, um, in Maryland, came back to the summer, people were pointing out that that I sounded country, and there was certain phrases like y'all, and I can't remember all of them, to be honest. It was so long ago, but I, you know, that became evident to me. Like, oh, okay, I was doing that to feel like, because you know, I, even though I'm a Leo, I'm an introvert as well. Um, and that showed up as shy because I was very insecure early on. And then once I started to become more confident with myself, you know, it just really became like, oh, okay, I like the attention, and I like to be, you know, have that. But after that, like, I need to go away. Like, I don't want to, I don't want to be in that all the time. Like, I need to have my space. Um, but I've always felt awkward in social situations, and I didn't realize that I was like picking up accents everywhere I go and picking up picking up different phrases and saying it. And, there, I've realized that, like, I've had certain friends that have said stuff, like, had a phrase that they were saying. And I like that phrase, so I started saying it, and then it became my phrase. Like, for example, if something bad happens or something like that, if you're like, oh, they leave trash there's trash everywhere, and you're like, this is why we can't have nice things. I had a friend that used to say that all the time, and then I started picking it up, and then I started saying it all the time, and then I thought that I made it up. And I realized, no, that was something that I was copying from somebody else, like, because they said it regularly, and so that was a thing that I shared with them. Like, I felt connected to them because we would say the same thing. But the accent thing, and the accent and the way that I talk, and then, has been always the topic of conversation from growing up. I grew up around a very diverse, mix of different people that I was friends with and that I knew and that I grew up around. But let's not get it twisted. It was predominantly white. Like, think Full House, think Modern Family, think, you know, middle-ish, upper middle to middle class, white suburbia with seasoning of black people, Asian people, and Latin people and African people. So I, when I was included in white culture, because, that era of the 80s and late 1900s, and today, racism is still really alive, but I was privileged to grow up in a place where it wasn't super in your face kind of thing. I grew up around a lot of nice white people. And, I have this, with some people will be with non-threatening look, personality, or whatever, which allows me to be in certain, not only feel comfortable, but be accepted in certain places that maybe some other black people wouldn't, or wouldn't feel comfortable. Like, when you show up somewhere and you feel like you don't have anything to worry about, it changes the energy in the room and how people treat you. If you feel like you're supposed to be there and nobody should check you, nobody's going to check you, most likely. Only the bold and the brave will. But if you look like you're not supposed to be there, you feel like you're radiating that energy, and people are going to fuck with you. And that's the only explanation I really have, like, when it comes to, like, how I'm able to move in different places and not get that energy toward me. I don't know. So yeah, social mimicry, or echopraxia, is one of my autistic traits. And then also a need for patterns and numbers. So numbers for me are, symbolic. A lot of people follow numerology. I do to a certain extent. I'm always trying to teach myself more stuff as the more that it shows up, and just learning more from my own, knowledge. But just in general, seeing different number patterns, I like to see them, and then when I see it, I want to see it multiple times, like in threes. And yeah, like, I need to, like, there was a phase probably about a year ago or so, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, um, where I was just, what day is it? The first of the year. We went from the old school party, and now this is probably gonna be picked up in audio, but the ice cream man sound is coming down the street. Like, what? It's not even his season. I don't know. Anyways. um so yeah, there was a phrase where, I just wasn't doing well mentally, and this tick presented itself of having to see the number like 1111 or any angel number specifically. I have an attraction to the number 808 because I love the number 8. And at one point, when I would see 808, I used to say 808 and Heartbreak, which is Kanye's album. And then I was like, I don't like that. So now I say 808, Life is Great. And so now every time I see that, I need to see. At that point, I needed to see it like on at least 3 other clocks or sources to see that number pattern. And if I didn't, like it would bum me out, and I would just be like, ugh. Sometimes if my angel, like the angel number, like 1111, like I would see 1110 for a while, and I realized that that's an angel number too, trying to tell you something. But like I would always want to see 1111, so I would wait, and then I would miss it. I'm like, and that would bum me out. Um, there would be, and I just have like little ticks that I do, um, like little nervous ticks that are also related to OCD. They're kind of all on the spectrum of each other, but um, like I make up little tunes, like when I'm nervous, and I didn't realize I was doing this until I start until YouTube video editing. That's when I noticed a lot of my neurospicy personality traits in the videos, because that I was able to capture it on film and see it in real time. And I was like, oh shoot! Like I would sing little tunes, or have like these little ticks that I would do to so there wasn't blank space. Like for some reason, sometimes, not all the time, my brain doesn't like blank space. So I'll just be like, dun, 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 dun. Sometimes it's like a catchy, like one of those tunes that they force into your brain through subliminal messaging on advertising from back in my day. Like not so much stuff now, but like, but some of those little jingles and tunes from um back in the day, like they'll pop up in my head, and I'll just sing that over and over and over again, and not even realize that I'm doing it, and and I'm doing it so that there's not space in dead time. So there's some type of noise. So yeah, that's my autistic personality traits. I don't really have coping mechanisms. I think that in itself sometimes is coping mechanisms, but you know, they they also show on the autism spectrum. And there's definitely other ones as well that I'm not super aware of, but these are the ones that I've definitely become most self aware of, and um, are, and I'm glad that I now have a reason for some of them, like the echopraxia thing that became a clue to me just a few years ago that that I do that social mimicking thing, because I became aware of it while I was doing it versus it being an unconscious thing. Once you become conscious, you become aware of a lot of your sorry, my computer was about to die. I had to turn on battery. There we go. You become aware of your human dysfunction. um, yeah. So moving on to OCD. So I would say OCD is probably one of the ones that I struggle with the most. Now, this isn't just like being over organized or anything like that. Like I had those phases. I'm not super strict about a lot of those things now, but I am very territorial about my space and my belongings. Like everything has a place, and when that order is disrupted, I get really defensive, shut down, like, or just I freak out in some way. So that definitely is a thing for sure. I think that became a thing from my childhood because my mom is a hoarder, and I always try to keep my space clean, and the general spaces clean, but there was just like some spaces where it was just like it was hard to watch, like it was hard to see, and I understand where it came from, but it was just like really, really traumatizing to be around. And so as I got older, like I became super, super OCD about organization and cleanliness. But as I've gotten older, it's kind of like not been as daunting, but that also comes from me living alone for almost a decade. So, like me living alone, I become comfortable in my own dysfunction. Like if things are disorganized, I know it's because of me. It's not because of anybody else. So I can only be frustrated with myself. um, so in that case, it may bother me, it may not. It definitely does bother me. Like right now, I'm looking around at my desk, and there's some things like I got something yesterday, the other day, a little file cabinet to organize some stuff that I have. That's just kind of like merging piles or merging like little baskets of like things that just need a place, and so I really want to reorganize my whole RV as it should, but like it's the dead of winter. Like I really don't want to. I did it right before I came, but there's a lot of things that need stuff. But just the immediate stuff for sure, like in the area of organization and like my food storage situation. It like I'll get in a funk and also get in a hyper focus mode of like, okay, let me just do this real quick, or I'll be like, I don't have time to get it done, and then I'll totally avoid it, and then it will start annoying me to the point where I just like can't take it anymore, and I'll just like stop my whole day to do something. Um, but the way that OCD shows up for me in the most embarrassing way, and it's the mental disorder that bothers me the most, but it's also like it's harmful, but it's not harmful, which is my skin picking disorder. Um, this I found out, late in the game that dermatillomania is a mental health condition where a person compulsively picks or scratches their skin, causing injury or scarring, also known as echo. Sorry, I didn't. These other X's. Sorry, I'm not good with like. Hold on. It's also known as excoriation disorder, um, or skin picking disorder. And this habit developed as a response to adult acne. Also around just insecurities about my skin and being dark skinned, and then just, scarring and dark knees from back in the day if you had brown knees. Like, um, there was a lot of insecurity around just that. And I didn't have acne as a teenager. Which is interesting because I did get my period really early. And so my hormones in my body definitely showed up early, but like as far as like acne, it didn't show up until my adult, like in college, late college into, graduating and all that stuff. So I would say like 19, 20, maybe 20 up until now. I've been a acne. I'm an acne survivor. I mean, I understand how it works now. I didn't in the past. I realize now what kind of like boosted why it did, and that's because I went to college and started eating all these foods that were fried, and then I started working at all these restaurants where I was eating food, which up until then, meals were scarce in my house, and we ate a lot of home meals, and it wasn't that often, that we were having these home meals, so the amount of like heavily, processed foods that came into my body at that time, like definitely no. But I didn't know that back then that acne had anything to do with your gut health. Like nobody knew that or was talking about that. It was all a skin condition. And when that started to arise, I tried to mitigate it by, using all the different creams and the different skin cleansers and all the product systems and proactive and all of this stuff. And it just wasn't helping. And, I realized now is because I was still eating the trash that was causing it. But like, um, it just it became really daunting for me, and I didn't the picking um obsession or fascination. It wasn't really bad or uncontrollable. Back then, like it wasn't. I would say in the realm of like OCD yet, early on. Like everybody, back then you pop a zit. Like you have a little thing. With my ex, um, he had like easily poppable skin. So like you could his little zits just sat right on the surface. You just pop it and then there was no scarring, nothing. So I really enjoyed doing his. And I think doing that, popping somebody else's and then doing mine, and they mainly showed up on my face and in my private areas. And not just like my hoo ha, but like under my arms too, like all my lymph nodes, everything was just inflamed and fucked up. So everything that any type of sensitive skin area had some type of acne. And I didn't understand what was going on. I really didn't understand for years and years and years and years and years of the struggle of trying to control the acne. But in that process, I started realizing that, like, I don't know, like popping it made me feel better. It made me feel like there was always pain. Like I had cystic acne really bad. That's usually what shows up. I don't really get all the time the little tiny zits. It's usually some cyst pocket that's huge and it hurts and it doesn't have a head, so you're squeezing at it and you're just trying to force a head. Um, but the majority of the scars on my face are from acne scarring from me picking at it. So generally the way that it shows up, like I said, as a cyst, if it does come in as a little pimple, I'll go squeeze at it, get the little pus out. That satisfies me. But that doesn't satisfy me enough because a lot of times when you're doing all that, then it gets swollen. But that still feels like more pus. So like I'm just squeezing, squeezing, squeezing because my skin, I don't know if it became super sensitive over time or if it's always been that way because my mom has super sensitive skin too. Everybody else in my family, aside from maybe my little brother, doesn't scar like that. Like they get some pimples or whatever. If they do get a little hyperpigmentation, over time it fades and it goes back to their normal skin color. But like my mom scars in a way where it does leave a hyperpigmentation and it does stay for a while. And so I believe I have the skin like my mom. So I would go and pick at it and then it would, bleed or whatever. And um then I would be able to stop it, put, some cream or whatever on it. And in some cases, depending on how deep I guess it was in the dermis, like it would make a flat scar. So a lot of times it would just kind of make a scar that I can't pick at. And then it would just leave this dark mark. And I was like, over time, my brain was like, okay, so that's the way you get the skin to be smooth again. Because what I realized about my acne over time, which I felt like grateful for at one point, but like also like it's still bad, but like that my skin didn't get the indentions like some people with acne who have really large pores. My pores are really small and really weak or like really thin, I guess. Um, and so like it doesn't take much trauma to the space, like me just squeezing it or, picking at it or whatever for it to cause scarring. Like it doesn't matter. The same thing happens outside of acne. Um, I have the same issue with mosquito bites. I am super allergic to mosquito bites. I have O positive blood. Mosquitoes love me. And it wasn't until probably the last 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years, where I've really like got on top of like trying to do my best at being able to enjoy the outdoors without being attacked by mosquitoes and having mosquito bites everywhere. So like, um, and I would say I probably have like 75 to 80% success rate in general. My go-to is garlic supplements, and then um, my own natural sprays, um, and just knowing when they like to be out and trying not to be out when they like to be out. At their highest order. But yeah, to get back to it, so when they bite me, um, it immediately turns red. It all I have to do is scratch at it a little bit, tap at it a little bit, and it leaves a dark mark. Like a little bit of it, like the discoloration happens before I even like, before the skin has really been too disturbed, as far as like a little bit of itching, yes, obviously, but like for that to go to my skin getting so thin that it breaks and then it now has an open wound. And that like that doesn't happen to everybody, and I didn't know that didn't happen to everybody, but like it's really really frustrating dealing with the mosquitoes. The mosquito bites mainly happen on my arms here, and then on the shins part of my leg, the front shin part, mainly on both of my legs, which um has always been really embarrassing for me to like want to wear, cute little skirts, because there's, a bunch of mosquito bruises that are my fault, and partially, because I did itch it to the point where it left some type of thing. But a lot of times, they will leave a keloid, I guess, scar, where the scab is raised versus it like healing over and like closing up or whatever. So the scar will be open wound, then it will go to like a raised thing. And when I see that raised thing, especially now, like I just want to scratch at it. Like I just like I can't. It will wake me up in my sleep. I'll wake up in my sleep, and my hand will like graze past something, and I'm like, oh, what is that? And then I'll just start picking at it. So I have like these like long term picking phases, like where I'll do it for a long time and then I won't do it at all for a long time. That mainly comes seasonal, like um especially if I'm able to have my acne under control, which I generally do. The only thing that I don't have under control right now is the hormonal acne that shows up on my chin. The rest of the acne that comes from food and stress and stuff like that, like I have that generally under control. Those areas are generally under control. If I do get some type of acne thing, I know what it's from, and I take that L. And it's usually not a breakout. It's usually like one or two, and we're good. And I generally know when it comes, and that's usually when I make a sacrifice on a food that I really want to eat. That's on the no list for acne, and I eat it anyway, and I know the consequences are gonna be there. But the the scars from the mosquito bites, like a lot of times I can't avoid. Like sometimes they just come out of nowhere, they get me, they attack me, and I'm just like, why? Um, they hurt. I'm very allergic to them. Some people are not, and they just get me. And I have some mosquito bite scars that haven't healed, that won't heal for months and years, like because I keep picking at it, and it will like kind of keloid over to a point where it doesn't have any ridges. Like when it has a ridge, that's what triggers my brain to pick. Like if it's like smooth and there's no ridge for me to pick at or like scratch at or anything like that, I leave it alone. My brain is not gonna go and just like, you know, that usually I'm not triggered to do that. Like it's usually because the trigger is an imperfection that I can feel. Like right now I have some stuff on my chin that I've been picking at a lot. Like I've been picking at a lot. Like recently I've been really stressed about income and, just like what I'm doing with my life. A little bit of an existential crisis. So stress definitely triggers more picking. unintentional picking. So it's like picking at things that don't need to be picked at, like, or like re-injuring a scar so that I can, not re-injuring it on purpose, but like, scratching at it, and that scratching, made the skin vulnerable enough. But it's the most annoying and embarrassing of all my mental health disorders. And the worst part about it is that it's visible. Like, the reason why like I wake up and show up in the world, I put makeup on, like, to cover up and hide, basically, or mask the disorder that I have, because not only is it acne, it is a mental health disorder of me picking at the acne that's leaving the evidence. If I left it alone, which I don't know who does that. Is that neurotypical people, like, that don't pick at their acne? Who doesn't pick at their bumps and like, but like, for people who have this condition, like, it's so impulsive. Like, you could just like go, and then just like you can't let it go. Like, it's a huge dopamine rush. Like, I can't even tell you, like I can just like go and like just go, 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 and it would be like the same amount of time passing by if I was scrolling on on social media. And I'm like, how did 30 minutes, 45 minutes go by of me just like picking at this one spot, trying to gently pull at a hair or a piece of skin that's just like hanging a little bit from not skin, but scab. It's just like, it has a little ridge, and it's like hanging just enough where it's like you could see it. If I try to cover it up with makeup, you would be able to see the little ridge. And so I'm just trying to like peel it back a little bit. I use tools, which is bad. It's like, that's when you escalate in the condition, is when you start using tools. When you're not just like picking with your hands. Like, if you're just like scratching, picking like this, um, anything, just like your hands or even your teeth, depending on where it is. But if you start having tools and you have them like around the house, and you have different things to help you, like, I have tweezers that are always sitting by my desk. I don't have a I don't have a mirror here. I have to get up and use a mirror. I used to have one right here, but I moved it. Um, but I'll just like and pick, feel and pick. And then when I feel like that's not satisfying enough, I go and find a mirror. And then pick, 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 pick. One pick leads to another pick. It's a whole thing. Like, the fact that I'm even talking about this, like, I've been wanting to talk about this for years, because the only way that I found out that this was a condition that that, that other people suffer with, and that other people, like, I had heard, at some point early on, before I learned about this, that people would pick at their hair and eyelashes, because I knew people that did that, or not knew personally, but like, I knew people, um that had like parents or like a sister or somebody that did that, where they picked out their eyelashes, or they picked at their hair. They would twirl at their hair until they could pluck it out. Um, I knew about that one. I didn't know that I thought that I was just weird and disgusting, and that I was insecure, and that was the reason why I was doing it. And my brain, like, I did it as it's progressed, it took a while as it progressed, into using tools and like hiding it, and like not wanting to do it in front of people, and then realizing that I am still doing it in front of people. Like, when sometimes I get nervous, and I'll find something and I'll just start scratching at it, like, kind of prepping the, it's a whole thing. Like, it's really hard to talk about. But like, I went on YouTube and I looked up like acne struggles or picking at the skin, and there was not that many, but there was a good amount of videos, generally mostly white girls and young white girls, that I saw that were explaining the same stuff, like the dopamine rush that you get from it, the insecurity, like, as far as like knowing, like, cognitively or consciously, I understand that none of this helps. Like, not all I'm doing is restarting the healing process every time I pick. Like, my brain, like, my conscious brain, like, understands that this is disgusting, it's toxic. Like it's an awful habit and behavior, and it doesn't help. Like it doesn't help at all. Like at all in the healing process. Like, but somehow I've tricked my brain into believing that it does, and it's now a compulsive disorder. Like I can't control it. Like I swear to God, like sometimes I'll just be doing it and I'll realize. Sometimes I'll be doing it in front of people and I'll realize, and I'll just like slowly stop. Um, Sometimes I wake up. I'll like wake up and like I said, I'll graze past something on my leg or something, and I'm like, or I'll just be at my computer. And if I know that I have like something on my face that's active or whatever as far as like healing, I'll just start doing it. Like not even and if I don't get up or something like that, my dog, dude, my last dog, Prince too. I'll look over there and I'll see them judging me, like giving me that judgy look, and I'm like, I mean, it's good and bad. Like I appreciate that they're trying to like help me stop doing it. But I'm like, damn, like he won't stop looking at me until I stop picking at it. So that's my OCD. And right now I don't have any healthy coping mechanisms for the dermatillomania. Like my biggest solution at this point is to rewire my brain with ayahuasca. I really really want to do ayahuasca so I can get back to the root of the insecurity when this seed was incepted, and just rewire my brain to like not do it. Like the way some people go take ayahuasca so they can get over an addiction. This is the addiction that I would like to kick. I can't stand that this is something that's part of my regular life. Like it's disgusting. And I fell into the and I watch here and there, but I had to unsubscribe to all of it because I realized by doing it, your brain doesn't know the difference, so it starts showing up so that you can. But those videos, was it Dr. Popper, Pimple Popper, and all those videos where they're just showing you squeezing nasty juices out of people's bodies, usually white people's bodies. Sorry, it's usually all white people or just white people in general. I've seen a few black people on the Dr. Pimple Popper. Um, but it's mostly been that, and it's just like, oh gosh, it's so disgusting. Like, first, how it got that bad. A lot of times, it's not like just a pimple. Like, it's like some huge cyst that's been sitting for years in the back of their face or something. But I love watching the like, or you know how like people watch porn so they can have an orgasm. Like I love watching those little pimple videos to have like a dopamine orgasm. Like it is thrilling. If you ask anybody, I mean, even people that are not that don't have this condition or whatever, like people really enjoy watching those videos. That's why they have millions and millions of subscribers, because they're really really satisfying to watch. Like somebody have this disgusting thing and somebody just goes in and relieves all of that. Or just like somebody has a bunch of little bit when they get real close up and they have all those little things and they pluck them out of their people's face. I'm like, ew, that's so gross. But I can't look away. But I had to stop watching those because it feeds my addiction, and it also then manifests so that I can pick my own face. Like I'll get something after watching those videos. Too self aware. So yeah, I really try not to watch. They're a guilty pleasure. Sometimes they inadvertently show up because I used to watch them and the algorithm sometimes doesn't understand. But I did unsubscribe to a lot of that stuff so that it doesn't show up. But yeah, so that's my OCD. That was a really long one. Um, I think I'm gonna go to what I have on my list is number 6, but so that I can skip over the other two that are kind of obvious, but not obvious, but are kind of a regular ingredient in a neurospicy personality, which is depression and anxiety. But I do want to talk more about them. And right now I'm getting close on the podcast thing. I don't know how long I'm gonna go. But I don't want to go super super long. But we'll see. But if you're enjoying this or any of this stuff resonates with you as far as like your journey, or if you relate to any of this stuff that I struggle with, please share it down in the comments. I really would love to know if I'm not alone in some of this stuff. Because it, definitely helps. Having a community of neurospicy people helps you feel like you're not alone in the world as far as being weird. You know, I've always known I'm weird, but now I have a reason, according to, Western medicine. I am on the spectrum of several different things that make up my personality, and explain the way that my brain works. So I really love sharing this stuff because it helps put things in perspective for people who, you know, may not understand where I'm coming from, or like, or that can, just empathize, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, so the next thing is dyslexia. And this is a diagnosed condition that I did not find out about until I was in college. Um, and that's because I had a professor that, somewhat cared about me doing well, and realized that, there was something going on as far as my papers that I was writing. Like, she understood that I understood, but based on the paper, there was no way to grade it like I understood, because it was, one, so many grammatical errors, and two, my thoughts were jumbled. Um, so my dyslexia shows up in language and processing. I don't know why I didn't put what the name of this dyslexia is in my blog, but there's a name for it. I always forget what it's called, but there's several different types of dyslexia. And the reason why, I wasn't diagnosed until college is because the most common form of dyslexia, at least back in the 80s and 90s, was the version where the words are jumbled, or you jumble the words, and or numbers, and you can't read it, or it doesn't make sense. So that was like the most common form. And so it wasn't until later and later studies and, behavior and human behavior and all that stuff, I'm sure, that they realized that there were other dyslexias that related to um, other complications of processing language. So for me, grammar and reading comprehension have been like the struggle for forever. I've always kind of had a disdain for reading, and it was because when I read as a child, and then I found out as a child that, I was behind in reading, so that, didn't make it any more encouraging for me to want to do it. But when I was doing it, like, it was, I would read, and I don't know if this is like my ADHD brain, like thinking off, like maybe something triggered a thought, and then I would think about what that was, but I would still be reading in the sense, but now not comprehending what I'm reading. So I would have to reread things over and over again just to like figure out what it was saying. Like, even simple sentences, I'm like, what? And so anything that, like, especially tests, time tests that had complex questions that require me to read something, then comprehend what it is, and then respond with my comprehension. If it wasn't like a multiple choice, I would be sitting there for a long time trying to figure out now what I want to say about that. Essays were really hard for me, again, because I was reading in a short amount of time, new text, and then having to comprehend this and then reflect back on that. um, all in a timed environment generally. And that stress, that timed environment would trigger not being able to comprehend what I was reading. So I would sit there and reread paragraphs and paragraphs, like just trying to figure out what it would say. I started learning coping mechanisms probably in like middle school on like how to make it easier for me, like highlighting keyword phrases, especially if I was able to identify keywords, like how you do the what is it? Find word key. I can't think of what it's called. When you have all the letters and the word find. I was really good at those. Like I could spot a word. If you told me what the word was, I could spot it. That then translated into me being able to, like, if there was some homework, usually it was a paper, there was a leading question that had the identifying text in the book that you needed to get the answer from. So I would usually just highlight that and then look for that identifying text versus trying to read the whole chapter, which would take me forever because reading the whole thing would not help me comprehend to translate to answer the questions of the homework. So what I would do is I would just take the answer, skim for that, find it, read that little passage, and answer the question. I just thought it was hard for me. Like I had no idea that my brain like was like, no, I reject um grammatical things from you and comprehensive. The grammatical things are, so I guess when I was learning this stuff, was trauma going on in my life, I guess, as a child, because I never also like picked up or like, it's not that I didn't pick up the rules. Like I learned the rules, I understand the rules in the sense, but my brain doesn't apply it every time. Why? Here's the first reason. The English language is trash. It's stupid. Like sometimes there's rules and then there's exceptions to the rules. All those fucking exceptions to the rules. Sorry, my language. So all those exceptions to the rules, my brain rejects. It's just like I before E. Like that's the only rule. Like it will hyper focus on that rule and then not know how to use it. So every time I see I before E, I'm like, which way does it go? I know there's a rule. I know there's a. So there's a few words that for years and even still till now, thank goodness, thank goddess, for spell check early on and back in the early Windows days. That really helped me, but it wasn't saving grace. Um, and then grammar check came, and now we have Grammarly and all that stuff. Thank goodness. But I like I spell the same words a few, like I have a good, like I don't know how many words it is, like I couldn't really tell you, but the word that always comes to mind that I always struggle with is experience. Every time, experience, maintenance, um uh trying to think of some words, but there's rules within those words of grammatical things where it's like, okay, if this happens, then this is how it's going to be spelled, kind of thing. Or there's too many letters that have like if there's like an N and then an A and then an N, but like it's not said like that. I know why my brain is dyslexic. It's because the English language is trash. Okay, I don't know if it would function this way if there was another language as my main language. Which leads me to language learning. Um, I I took Spanish. That was the language that I took or that I chose as my language that you take throughout your middle school, high school, college. You always have to have that foreign language. I always took Spanish. So collectively, I think I took about 6 years or so of Spanish. And there's a lot of rules in Spanish. There's a lot of rules in Spanish, okay? But my brain did pick up a lot of Spanish. Like I comprehend a lot of Spanish. Like I can read a lot of Spanish. I can understand when people are saying stuff. I might not understand every word or even every phrase, but my brain understands like the rules and like some of the vocabulary enough to like put what they're saying together and be like, oh, okay, they're talking about this. Um, and I've been immersed in different situations where, Spanish was the only language being spoken. So, I comprehend, but I can't speak Spanish. Like, I try. Like, I know a few things. You got your key phrases like, ¿Cómo estás? Bien, y tú? Hablo español, that kind of stuff. Like, I have some key phrases, obviously, in my brain. But the way that my brain translates language is that, particularly with Spanish, is the only one that I really have tried to study or studied. So let's say I'm hearing a conversation. Somebody says something to me in Spanish, and I'm like, oh, I understand what they're saying. So I translated it from Spanish into English in my brain. So my brain comprehended. It was like, okay, that's what it's saying in my language. Okay. Then my brain is like, okay, I know what I want to say back, but then I can't. Either I don't remember, there's an error in my brain, or it just doesn't translate back so that I can, like, I would understand the same response, but like, my brain doesn't translate it from English to Spanish so that I can say it out loud. So that's difficult. um, and then also, I learned from video editing that this also shows up in the way that I talk. And as I've been editing videos over the last few years, I've realized the difficulty that I've had in connecting with people and communication with people. Like, I'm all down for transparency, talking it out, communicating, all this stuff. But I always ran into a wall of frustration when I was doing all of that. Like, I felt like I was speaking another language. I didn't understand why people didn't understand what I was trying to say. And it was because my brain wasn't spitting it out in a comprehensible flow so that you could put all the pieces together to figure it out. So normal people talk like in a story. They have the A and the B and the C of the story. The beginning, middle, the end of story, right? Way my brain talks and writes as well, which is why I understand why papers were no good. Like, the way that my brain talks and writes is it might do ACB or BCA. So I might like tell the end of the story and then give you the middle, tell you the beginning, and you're just like, what the fuck? I might tell the beginning of the story, go off on a tangent of EFG, then come back and tell you B, because EFG related to B, which is why I had to tell you EFG. But now B doesn't flow because now you forgot A. Like, so now I understand why people don't understand me. This is why I have a hard time connecting with people. But this is how all of this stuff shows up. So I'm very long winded because my brain is trying to compute at a different rate than the way that it wants to flow. And then also when I start talking, then an interruption happens of another thought. While one thing is just like, I'm telling the story, like that triggers something. And then it's like, okay, I gotta tell this real quick. And then I don't know what to tell people. Like, I don't know what to tell people. I don't even know what to tell myself sometimes. I really, like, I'll have a script. I have my notes right here so that I can stay on topic, but I get really long winded because I just start talking. I don't want to edit this. Like, I really don't want to edit a podcast. Like, I really just want to let it go raw. I would love to do it live, but then it would go in a different category of my videos, and I want it to go in video, recorded videos versus live videos. But yeah, like, it's all real frustrating. Like the English language in general was not supposed to be my first language. I think that that's clear through the dyslexia thing, but we speak through frequency and light language and energy. I know energy is like my main language. I understand energy and I understand when it changes and I understand, I'm not always good at transmuting it or alchemizing it, but I do understand it. More than I understand the English language. Um, but yeah, so that's a struggle. And, you know, I took that struggle as a challenge after finding out about that. And then, I've always wanted to, after, learning about that, I always then felt really accomplished by reading a book. I got through most of schooling, all, general education and higher education, without reading a full book. I'm the master at skimming when it comes to higher education. I know what they want to know, so I just look for the answer and give it to them. Like, I don't memorize it in general. Like, I might learn something, I might capture a few moments in my long-term memory, but in general, I'm the education system is to tell you what they think and then for you to verbatimly tell them back what it is that they told you. And if you're wrong about that, then you can't do it. Like, I understand a lot of things. Like, there's a lot of changes that I've made in my life as far as food and chemicals and all kind of things, but I can't explain it to anybody. It's like I don't remember like why I did it, but it made sense to me when I was learning about it and comprehending it. But I can't then tell you back with good reason, like with backed up facts and remembering certain things about it, that would make sense for you to do it. I always like to tell people, just go Google let me show you where I learned this information because I'm not gonna be able to tell you. If you don't want to learn it that way, then you're not gonna learn. But that's how I learned it. Um, but when I have read books, like I have a few books. I have the pile of hopeful reads, and then I have the pile of accomplished reads, and it's a very small pile. And they're my favorite books, mainly because I read something I was really interested in and I was really intrigued. It did take a long time because I can't get through, a book like some people could sit down and read a book in a week. Like when people tell me that and they boast about that, I'm just like, good for you. Or they're like, or my biggest thing that I hate, my biggest pet peeve is when people brag about, oh, I read the book. Like when there's a movie and they're like, oh, I read the book. And I'm like, good for you. Like, what do you want, a fucking trophy? Like, I watched the movie and I skipped hours of reading the book. And I got the same picture imagery. and I got 3D picture imagery without having to read it. But when people boast about that, like, I used to be insecure about that, reading, because that was an insecurity. It's an insecurity for Black people, has been an insecurity for Black people before my time and even still now, but about illiteracy. And there's a lot of things that come in when it comes to illiteracy. I think a lot of my dyslexia came from trauma related incidences that from my childhood during that like comprehensive phase, like I feel like that's part of it, but I could be wrong. But yeah, so that's this dyslexia, for me. Like I think that reading is very important, but if there's a movie or a show or a video, that's what I'm going to go to because it's not going to take me as long to comprehend what it's trying to say. But that doesn't stop me from writing. That doesn't stop me from, reading stuff here and there. I do read. I read blogs. I read short articles and, things like that. But I'm like, I don't know when's the last time I read a book from cover to cover, like in a minute. Like, but I did write a book, which is like an oxymoron to dyslexia. But it wasn't about writing a book. And it wasn't about proving to myself that I could write a book because I used a ghostwriter to help me with my dyslexia issues, which is grammatics and sentence processing and comprehension of my thoughts. Um, so I did use a ghostwriter in that sense, but like just the fact that I wrote a book, like, is a huge accomplishment for me because, it's very difficult for me to read a book. And I wrote one because I was very passionate about this subject. And I felt like that was the place to start when it came to teaching that lesson, is through a book. So that's why I wrote that book. I don't know if there's going to be another book. I've been wanting to edit that book because when I read through it last time, I was really embarrassed by myself. I was like, I wrote this. Not the whole thing, but there's definitely some things. And it's because that's from the old me, you know. There's some things that have changed about myself. I wrote that right at like the line between that veil before I crossed over during my spiritual awakening. I wrote it during that veil point, like where I was like starting to fade away from um the societal projections and like learn that there's a Wizard of Oz and there's a veil of all the shit that they're not telling us. And then I crossed over to the side, like I wrote it right on the other side of that. So there's a lot of things in the book that are just like outdated from my own perspective, and then also that are just outdated in general. But I've always wanted to edit that book and maybe write another book, or people are doing ebooks now, which are little short books and stuff like that. I want to make sure it's something that I would read. But that's the reason why I started my blog, because I have some stuff that I want to write down, and that I do write down. I'm still old school, where I write a lot of stuff down, that I want people to know about, that I didn't feel worthy of like making a video necessarily, so I put it in a blog. I do use ChatGPT to help me write my blogs, and yeah, and I'm grateful for all of the tools that help me not struggle so much with this, because it was a struggle growing up. Facing something like this and not knowing that you had it, and then not having anybody help you with it, or let you know that it was off. Um, I still struggle with it, but I'm grateful for tools. So the next things, they kind of go together, or at least they kind of spark off of each other, but they are two separate dysfunctions. One is depression. A lot of us in America suffer from depression. It's really depressing here, okay? And a lot of us have had some childhood trauma to be depressed about, okay? That never got healed or acknowledged when we were young, and then we brought that coping mechanism into our adult life, yada yada yada. But for me, I would say, this is something that is diagnosed. I did find out in my late 20s, that it wasn't just me being sad and unmotivated, or not even unmotivated, being sad, and something that I've always done is suffer in silence. And it was because I didn't have any coping mechanisms, and the only one that I knew was just to be quiet and just internalize everything. Um, that only worked for so long. But what triggered my depression, at least I believe, would be the passing of my father when I was young. My dad died, and I was, of his 5 children, I was the only one, probably. Really, I want to say, like, I can say this with confidence, but I'm the only one that has good memories of him. Um, my 2 oldest brothers, that he had children, my 2 oldest brothers, they don't have good memories of him because he was like the deadbeat, absent father, the guy that said I'm gonna come and never showed up, that guy to them. And then he had me, and I was like his princess, like, and he loved my mom. So, but that only lasted for so long. So Toya was conceived, and around that time is when drama started to happen. And so my mom started doing what she had to do to protect her children. And so, um, Toya doesn't really know him at all. She didn't really know him that much. And anything that she might remember was in a phase where he was, you know, doing nice things and not nice things. So, like, I do have not so good memories of my dad as well. But a lot of my early childhood memories of him were good memories because he was there for me. And when I did see him, like, I have early childhood memories of us, like, playing when I was, like, barely able to walk and stuff like that. Like, I have very, very good memories, from that time where I was in and out of theta mode when I was, like, between 1 and 5. Um, so I do have a lot of good memories of him. And then his last child, my youngest brother, or his youngest son, was a baby, basically a toddler when he passed away. So he never even knew him. Like, he was a oops. We were all oops babies, but like he was like a oops before I get out kind of thing. And yeah. So I took it. I feel like I took it the hardest, like, of anybody, because I did have. It wasn't just like our dad died when we were younger. That was a common thing to happen in the '80s. In the black families, like, that wasn't anything new. You either had a deadbeat dad or your dad died. You know what I'm saying? Like, that wasn't anything new. But, like, that for a lot of people that just caused a lot of childhood trauma, and for me it definitely stemmed to depression and suicide. Like, I definitely had a lot of suicidal, like, battles that I struggled with in middle school and high school and even, in college, and, you know, throughout adult life. We all get those things, but it definitely was, in those early years, like, something I didn't understand. And so all of that and not having any support or counseling coming with that, all that was just bottled up, and then eventually it just, like, my my brain and my body shut down. And that's what led to anxiety. So I started having, when I really knew that I had to figure out something, is when um I got really, really fat. um and I was this is when I realized that high functioning depressive people existed. When you are up and doing what you're supposed to do and taking care of your responsibilities and, all of that, living life and having happy moments and trying to make the best out of everything, and being positive and showing up and masking for people, and being a people pleaser and all of those things for years and years and years, eventually your body says, I'm done now. And I had that moment when I was having back to back panic attacks. And this leads to, like, the anxiety thing. But I was having back to back panic attacks, and there was a lot of things going on in my life that just was toxic. And um, when I finally sought out help through a free depression study, that's when I was able to get meds and stuff like that. And I can say the meds helped a little bit. Who knows if I was on the placebo or not? At one point, I probably was. But in general, I felt like it helped. At least it felt like it helped because I felt like I was doing something to cope with what was going on and I didn't understand. Like, I was literally having a breakdown mentally, like, and I didn't understand. Um, and uh, so much goes into depression. I think we can all, like, go into that, but for me, it's the silent struggle, and being high functioning. Um, I with my dogs, I have a purpose, and if they weren't here, I don't know what would be going on, because seasonal depression is also my next biggest struggle. So, um, I realized, I don't even remember when this became. Oh, when I moved to Houston and I had the first winter when it wasn't super freezing cold and there was no snow um in the forecast or coming, and it was warmish, like it was more fallish weather. That's when my that's when I started to become aware of like seasonal depression, and that was a thing. Um and but yeah, like I have super hard seasonal depression, especially now being a solo nomad. Um and I try my best to be a snowbird and be in warm places, because I don't like cold weather. I like the sun. I don't like the short days. There's so much. There's so much, and I just complain about it. But there is something to seasonal depression with the vitamin D deficiencies and all of that, and magnesium deficiency because of the lack of vitamin D, and there's so many things that go with that I'm very aware of. Like I'm very aware that I'm gonna be seasonally depressed. The other things I try my best at keeping up with the things that have helped me cope with depression or manage my depression, which would be like meditating, um, regular exercise, like specifically like yoga. Practicing yoga definitely helps as far as like the movement part of it and the meditation part of it. And like dancing and working out specifically, and self-care just in general. Like that has been the biggest like saving grace, like when it comes to helping cope with depression, is self-care. Like when you can start doing things to love yourself and take care of yourself first, like that becomes a regular part of your routine. Like, and I've fallen off over probably the last couple of years, where it's just been hard to manage with the whole travel lifestyle and stuff like that. But when I have a regular like slow morning and self-care morning and routine of just doing things for myself, whether it's daily or monthly, like whatever it is, like, and I take time out and I prioritize that specifically with my morning routine, it helps so much with my day and positivity and not feeling like but when I'm not doing it, I definitely recognize it, and I know right now I need to get back into it. But it's seasonal depression. Like I'm in seasonal depression season, like until I get to somewhere warm and I can see a beach. Like, cause the beach is my happy place. I haven't been to a beach since the beginning of the year, and it's really, it's really making me sad. But yeah, so there's that. But it's my biggest struggle is like the masking, like pretending that it's all good, because there's a fine line pretending so that you can raise to that vibration and not feel the low vibrational feelings that you're feeling. So you have to have some delusion in that. But and then there's also the line of like completely ignoring, completely just pretending that I like toxic positivity. Um, so I can get up and I'll be on autopilot most of the time, and that autopilot, I'll stop and realize, like, why am I doing? What is the purpose and function of all of this? I'm just up doing stuff, and yeah. So those are my depression, neurospicy personality, things. As far as anxiety, um, I would say the biggest thing for anxiety, outside of me telling you about the panic attacks, which eventually I, came across breath work, and and that's something that I want to add again back to my routine that's not there. But after doing it for the Wim Hof method for a good, I want to say solid 2 years, maybe almost 3 years during the pandemic, the panini, um, I would wake up every day, starting my day with the Wim Hof breathing video. And eventually my body started to auto regulate. And I started noticing this, that when I would get into a stressful situation, whether it was a crowd, too many people, a social situation where I was uncomfortable or anything like that, where I would get frustrated or anything like that, that would trigger a panic attack or just a stressful situation. Not everything is a panic attack, but a very stressful or frustrating situation. My body would go into auto regulation of deep breathing. Like I would automatically, my body would automatically use breathing to control the stress, and it still does that. I need to keep tuning it by regularly doing breath work again, but that was such a saving grace. On top of doing different types of meditations and stuff like that, um, and then also just a lot of like woo woo type stuff, like witchy woo woo, law of attraction, all that good stuff. That definitely helps with managing anxiety in general. But I would say that the other thing for me when it comes to anxiety is the fine line of needing connection and wanting to have community and regular interaction with people and needing my solitude. There's like this fine line where my brain is constantly being like, I need to connect, I need to connect. And then going into solitude and like not talking to anybody, not connecting with anybody, and just finding there's joy in that, but there's also alone and stress in that. Like, so, and it's like, I come off as somebody who's an extrovert, and that's because I'm an ambivert. Like I do have this extrovert personality that when I am in need of connection, and I feel like I'm around my people, or I want to put on a show. There's that too. That comes with the autistic thing. But if I feel like I want to put on a show or I'm around my people, I'm very outgoing. Um, but outside of those circles, I have social anxiety. And I realize as I've gotten older too, and with all this crazy stuff that happens in the world, that I don't really like being in large crowds. Like I'd rather be in small settings. I realized this as I kind of detached from the club scene. I realized that I would get a lot of anxiety being at the club because it was too many people in there. And when I would go to like little lounges and bars where it was just like a little chill scene, just a few people, enough people in there to make it seem like it wasn't dead, but like not an overwhelming amount of people. You can't hear yourself talk, stuff like that. I realized I gravitated more to that because it was less anxiety. And over time, I just like phased out of the whole club thing because it was just too much stress. It was too much. It was that on top of drinking alcohol and doing whatever else. Like, that is, I realized that was the trigger. That was one of the triggers of my anxiety, is forcing myself to constantly be in these social environments that I was uncomfortable, like the club. Um, and but I've realized that now that I've like gone to the other side, like the whole other side of like the introvert, and recognizing like that's who I am. I do recharge when I'm in solitude or not a lot of people. I like when I can connect with people deeply instead of there being a quantity of people or there's all these people. Um, and but yeah, like I just have this like very fine line of like craving to the point, like craving connection, like where I get really heartbroken or really like feeling betrayed when like I do finally have social interaction with people that I want to have social interaction with, and we don't connect, or like we don't spend enough time together. That goes along with my like quality time love language thing, but like we don't spend a lot of time together, and so I don't feel like we connect. And I and so all that expectation of and need for social interaction doesn't get fulfilled. Um and then I'll pull back into my solitude and then feel really, really lonely. Like I can't connect with anybody. Nobody wants to hang out, that kind of thing. And so I'll be really lonely wanting to connect. But then if I am in a connection situation or a social situation where there is no connection, I want to be back by myself. Like, it's the whole thing. And within that, there is a lot of anxiety and stress. Um, and then I would say, lastly, the biggest anxiety that most people have is around money. This is a source that, is beyond. I've worked on this money anxiety and money mindset. It's been my number one thing that I've been trying to heal is my belief around money and how money flows, basically, when you have it or when you don't have it. And it's an ongoing struggle and battle, but I do produce a lot of anxiety around it. And I really, it's not just like, oh, I don't have any of it or where is the next one going to come from. It's also just like being super hyper independent about that to the point where I won't ask for help. And then feeling like I don't have anybody to ask for help when I need it. And I'll get very anxious about this story that I'm creating in my head, which I know it's not always true. Sometimes it is. I don't know a whole lot of people that aren't struggling like I am, that could help me out when I need, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to hear from me or they don't, you know what I'm saying? Like, that they don't want to try to help. And, I always feel like I don't have anybody to, and that's comes with depression too. But like, that's why I feel like anxiety and depression, like, kind of like, they're like brother and sister. They're brother and sister, or they're yin and yang. Like, you can't have one without the other. Most people have both. You know what I'm saying? Like, not everybody, but most people have both. Um, my coping mechanism for both of these, has been cannabis. I turned to cannabis after not being an adult, cannabis consumer. Well, I am an adult cannabis consumer. Let me rephrase that. Not consuming cannabis as like a stoner or anything like that throughout my 20s. Like, yeah, I had, everybody smoked weed in high school, but not like where I felt like, oh, I gotta have it. I gotta have it. Like, I smoked it so I could be social and go to, be around people that are also smoking. It was the one thing that I enjoyed, and I didn't want to do anything else, any other substances, because I was totally against that because, the situation with my dad. But, um, and then when I got into my 20s, it was kind of like oh, let's do it on New Year's or, whatever. And then I was kind of like against it for a little bit, as far as because, once you start doing stuff with jobs and stuff, they're always drug testing you. So you're constantly being drug tested for like tip jobs or new jobs or whatever. Like, just like, I don't want to smoke weed. It's the only one, it's the only substance that will show up on a test, really, if you're doing it regularly. Because every other drug on those tests, you would have to be a fucking crackhead to show up at a test that you knew was coming. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's a spontaneous drug test, they gonna catch some crackheads. But if you're going for a job and you know that you have to be clean for a drug test, but you smoke crack every day, you're gonna take a day or two off so you don't show up in your bloodstream, because it doesn't show up in their bloodstream the way if you smoke weed for like a day or two. Like, you got 30-day clock on that one before it's kind of out of your system. So yeah, I was kind of against it because I was like doing a lot of corporate jobs, and my partner at the time wasn't about that. Like, we drank, we consumed a lot of alcoholic beverages instead. But I was totally against it, and it wasn't until my last year of my 20s, which I was going through my Saturn return, which I didn't know that's what it was called at that time, but I recognize all the symptoms now. But my last year of 20s, that whole year, me and my good friend at the time, she was a full-time stoner. She smoked every day. She needed to smoke all the time. every time I was with her, I would smoke with her. So I was smoking, I wouldn't say regularly, but more regularly than I ever smoked before. And I wasn't worried about a drug test at that time because of the type of work I was doing at that time. So I wasn't worried about that. And I wouldn't say I fell in love with weed at that point because I did get some, we did, both of us got in some trouble with weed. That really turned me away from it for a while. It wasn't until it came up on my radar during that veil of my spiritual awakening when I was really getting into herbs and holistic healing because I had some chronic pain and I was still dealing with depression and I didn't always have access to meds, and so I was like, I don't want any of the medicine anymore. I don't want any of the crap. And I was going through that phase of just purging all the crap, and that's when cannabis came back on the radar as far as like, help with depression and da 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 da. I didn't know anything about that. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's when I gave it a try again, and now we're here, full time stoner. So, it's definitely something that helps regulate my system, but it's a tool that I use in combination with other things. It is a regular use medicine that I use. If I'm not doing anything else, I am consuming my medicine to help regulate. And I feel like it does in the sense of one, in the placebo effect, in the sense of like when people say, oh, I need a drink or I need a smoke or whatever, like when you do that feeling, when you say you need to do it, or if you have a regular routine like me, like I smoke and I look forward to having my morning smoke, my midday smoke, my night smoke, like when it's that, like at some point it becomes like placebo, like you just it regulates your system because it knows it's coming and it knows you're gonna satisfy that, and then but also it has the all the medicinal benefits. You know what I'm saying? It is doing some work, not all the best work, based on the sources we're getting it from now, but it is doing something, and it does help me, and so I do use it regularly because of my neurospicy personality and to help with coping with some of those things. It definitely helps with, a good plethora of the list of things. So, I think that's all I wanted to talk about. Like, it's 2 hours in. I don't know how long a podcast really is supposed to be. To be honest, I used to do podcasts on High Moments, and they were like 30 minutes, 40 minutes or less. Like, I try not to make it too long. Because people have a short attention span these days. But I realized with the whole podcast emergence on YouTube, you can put this on and just listen to me talk and go on. You don't have to look at it. You can put your earbuds in, go for a run, or whatever you do. Don't use earpods, actually. They're frying your brain. Anyways, but yeah, that's basically the breakdown of my neurospicy personality. So that's ADHD, autism, OCD, depression, anxiety, and dyslexia. The bonus traits that I have, and I'm not going to go into, they are on my blog if you want to kind of look at the brief thing, and maybe I'll do a whole little podcast at some point about each one of these just because they're good topics to talk about. But one, I would say there's the me finding out, not finding out, but realizing that I'm an empath. And I guess I found out because a lot of people had to tell me before I realized what it was. And then I also found out that that's also linked to being a highly sensitive person. I feel like I've always been a highly sensitive person. And, through coping mechanisms and things like that, my empath side came together with my intuition. But just always being sensitive to energy. I've always said that. I've always noticed when energy changes and when the vibration is low versus high. Like, I've always been in tune with that before I knew what it was called or before I had anything to correlate it back to any type of spiritual anything, hoo-ha, whatever. Like, I've always been a highly sensitive person where I just, yeah. And a lot of that stems from like early childhood stuff, and coping mechanisms and things like that. But so yeah, there's that like adds another layer. I would say these are kind of like icings on the layered cake. And then I had put in the INFJ personality type from the Myers Briggs personality quiz thing, that breaks down kind of more about, like, I guess, like the scientific things around, the differences in our brains and things like that based on this test. So I like using that one. It definitely is self assuring as far as like how they, or it's suggestive for sure about like, um, how you can relate to what they are explaining based on what you told them and the results. But I definitely resonate with that, and that's a whole nother personality type we can go down. But INFJ A is introverted, intuitive, feeling, judging, assertive, or advocate. And, you get the introverted part. That makes sense. Intuitive, yes. Judging, I'll go into a whole nother thing when it comes to that. But my brain automatically puts people in categories and wants to. It's not judging necessarily, but it's definitely based on the information that it already knows. It does this thing like how you see in like movies, like with the robot. Oh no, I hope I'm not a robot. It's all a simulation. Anyways, like when you see like the like RoboCop or any of those like little things where they have a face mask on, and in that face mask it like tells them information based on what it's seeing, right? That's how my brain works. When I started reading the stuff about when it broke down the judging part of this, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, because like as soon as I see something, whether it's a person, a thing, an animal, a situation, whatever, my brain starts calculating and computing, and then it identifies what it already knows versus on what it's seeing. And when there's a difference, it wants to figure out why there's a difference. So it automatically starts calculating all the categories, all the differences, all the things that make it weird to my brain or make it intriguing to my brain. And all of a sudden it starts subcategorizing stuff to determine whether, I want to investigate further with curiosity, or if I don't give a fuck, or just judging in general, like how I should approach this thing based on all the information that just computed in my head. My brain automatically does that, like when it sees new stuff, like all the time. And yeah. And then lastly, I would say just, the sexuality spectrum and orientation and all that stuff, that also comes into play with all of our neurospicy or just personalities in general. Because, some of these labels definitely have some social norms to them, but they are in general divergent from the social norm when it comes to spectrum. It's not one or the other. I'm bisexual, which means that I like both sexes of the spectrum in different ways and for different reasons. And then also, relationship wise, I am polyamorous, which means that, and even on the relationship style spectrum, there's so many things. It's not just polyamorous and monogamy. Like there's so many little things in between. Now on the spectrum, I'm definitely pretty poly. I'm pretty poly. I would love to have a main partner, um, and another partner, but I could look like a monogamous couple. I have looked like a monogamous couple in my past relationship. But that wasn't the case. So polyamorous is a relationship style that you choose to be able to, I won't get into it, but really it's just about, I feel like it's about self-love and um human con- human connection preservation and power over your own happiness and love. Um, but yeah, but that's definitely breaking the social norm. Like people don't like the idea, as the term polyamorous and polygamy, which are two different things, have emerged over the last, I would say, 20 years, 10, 20 years. Um, especially since I've been practicing. And it was something that was set in the dark and the silence before, and then it came out of the shadows. And it's still stigmatized in a lot of different ways because of the media. But if you are actually exploring within the lifestyle, you find out there's so many connections that make more sense than monogamy, if that's all you've ever known. So, anyways, but I would like to say that all of these things are things that I embrace and I'm very self aware of now. Now, do I have all the answers of figuring out how to cope with them and how to move through life? I think every season and every changing of year or of cycle around the sun for me um, has definitely affected the healing and misunderstanding of my personality in general and how all these things fit in. And I would say it wasn't until this year, maybe last year, but really this year, that I've really embraced all of these things and realized that these are all labels of struggles that the human brain is trying to break out of the matrix. Like, it's the battles and the struggles that help us like not be enslaved in the matrix. Because you have to have perfect programming in order to thrive there. And for us neurospicy people, we don't, and they don't like us. They don't like us at all, and they try to, and with all these labels and things, like it definitely helps to clarify things. I definitely think that labels aren't all bad. Like, it definitely helps categorize and clarify, but within that, it confines you into a lot of times a derogatory or negative stigma of whatever they're trying to portray. Like, you have some problem. I'm like, no, my brain views the world differently, and it's going to create a solution that's different from the social norm, based on the information that it has. And that's really how I've moved through life, is coming up with creative solutions to still move through the world successfully. Nobody would guess any of this stuff. That I struggle with any of this stuff. Most people would look at me and probably think that I'm normal. I would hope you don't. I hope that you know I'm weird from the beginning. But specifically because I'm a solo female black RVer. So hopefully that is a test to me being weird. But if you didn't know about, some of the label identification struggles that I've had, and just, being restless with not having an answer for some of the ways that, my brain works, and trying to have it, and having to be in certain circles around normal people, and not feeling seen, not feeling like anybody identifies with me, because I thought I was just a weirdo. And yes, I am a weirdo, but now I have a reason. But yeah, that's all I got for this. I've gone way longer than I thought. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to cut any of this. But I just really wanted to share this information and my story and testimony or whatever, when it comes to this, because I think the more stories out there of self-awareness and just testimony of the struggle allows other people to see that they're not alone. And we can all us neurospicy people, can connect and realize that there's a group of weirdos, factions, divergence, that we're the ones who came to heal the planet. We're the ones who came with the superpowers, because you have to have superpowers to be able to figure out how to move through the matrix when you have this spicy personality. Making it more difficult for the people that are just programmed to move seamlessly. But that's all from me. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Keep It Real. This is my first podcast of this sort, so hopefully you come back for the next one. I'm going to try to do this weekly. But this is where the weird gets real and the real gets fun. I'm Queen Tasha, reminding you to keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep it real. Make sure you subscribe. Until next time, stay weird, stay spicy, and stay real. Catch you in the next episode. Deuces!